All right, everybody. This is Nick from Beer and Broadband. I'm excited for another episode to chat with some very smart people about a lot of different topics. See, they're nodding in agreement, guys. So they know how smart they are. It's amazing. It's amazing. So we are actually at Mountain Connect right now. Lots of stuff going on. But let me introduce the guest, and then we'll jump right into some entertaining topics. Manuel?
Yeah, Manuel Gomez. I'm with the Holy Cross Energy over in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. I'm their fiber and broadband director. Kind of a newly created position over at Holy Cross because we didn't have anybody focused on the fiber network, and with us deploying, we needed somebody involved in that program. So
Awesome. Well, welcome.
thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Bill Blackford, General Manager and CEO of Farmers Telephone, and now also FTI Wi-Fi. Drew?
Breaking news here again.
Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Yeah, hi Nick. I'm Drew Pappas. I'm our director of business development. Director of business
Okay,
development.
for the record, he's not even had a beer
Yeah,
yet, so
not even
he's
yet.
he's
But actually, I'm our chief beer drinking officer. That is my title here at Bonfire. Yeah, I've worked at Bonfire the last 6+ years. So I've started off in construction and then worked and on kind of the OSP engineering side of it, and then have been on the BD side, getting to work with guys like Bill and Manuel for the last couple of years now. So it's been
awesome. Well, welcome. So we have obviously we have a couple different types of businesses here with us. So let's actually start with that. The differences in the difference in Holy Cross versus Farmers. Like, what's the difference? And obviously in Bonfire, as a kind of a turnkey solution provider. So maybe just explain for the audience what type of a business entity is Holy Cross.
Yeah, so we are an electric co-op, and we're member-owned, like most co-ops in the nation. And we really are there to service our members, service our community, and work with great partners such as Bonfire in order to get things established in a fashion that's more financially responsible with our members. Because ultimately, our members are our bosses.
So you have a lot of bosses.
I do. If you want to go by meter counts, roughly 60,000. So.
Yeah, that is an organizational chart. I would really not want to have to deal with.
It's pretty flat.
Yeah. It's,
So when did on the co-op side of it, when did kind of the Holy Cross start kind of pushing into the fiber stuff, or start kind of going down that road of wanting to?
So we took it to our board about in 2019 about discussing how we can do fiber and bring better, more reliable internet to our members in 2019. 2020, we started really getting the plans laid down. Okay, this is what we want to do at that point.
in the middle of a pandemic, right? Yeah.
Well, just right at the beginning. But once we got that established, we said, okay, board, this is what we're planning on doing. This is kind of the financial outlay that we're looking at. We had a few other choices to do fiber to the home projects. Unfortunately, we didn't want to leverage our entire electric infrastructure to do that.
Okay.
So in order to do that, we would have had to leverage the entire poles, wires, infrastructure, buildings, everything in order to do fiber to the home. We were looking at like $225 million for the entire project. So at that time, the board said, no, we just want to do middle mile, and we'll work with third-party vendors to drive that fiber forward into the home. But if we can provide that pathway, that's the best way we can provide service to our members at a reasonable cost.
So what was the driver? I guess we've had a couple conversations here today about the why and like the purpose, and you guys started in 2019. What precipitated having that conversation for your members? Like, what changed in your guys, both your model and your kind of purpose as an organization?
As an energy utility, we actually have done a lot of command and control of our devices in the field with unlicensed radio.
Okay.
And a lot of those are inherently, slow or latent in conversations, right? So we wanted to get to this point of being 100% renewable by 2030. Well, how can we do that? Well, we need to put in some sort of backbone to allow for grid resiliency. So we do have privatized microwave, so we have that going for us, but we still need that fast, instantaneous communication to those devices in the field, because you need near millisecond times when you're working on some of this equipment.
So the impact of, I mean, obviously the climate changes were part of the issue there too.
A little bit, yep. Because you have oil and gas going with unlicensed wireless, and it's just an increasingly crowded spectrum to be working in.
All right, so Bill, I mean, from your perspective, obviously a little bit different, same focus on constituents and community, but a little different model.
Yeah, I mean, we probably come from the same DNA.
I could tell you guys look. I mean, you guys looked. I mean, you look strikingly similar. I mean, come on, cheers.
So, as a company, right, we started in 1920 as a co-op. Farmers basically were like, hey, we have to ride our horse 20 to 30 miles to go make a phone call. And so they decided to create a cooperative, right? And that's how Farmers was born. They actually used some of their fences and put in poles and things like that. So as far as the mindset of Farmers is very similar. Although we did move to a for-profit company in recent modern history, our DNA, our character, who we are, really serves a lot of the same intention about serving our shareholders, basically members, and our members of our communities. So that's really, our focus. So it's very similar in that sense. I think it's exciting to hear about the mid-mile, because that's something that as a provider, we really struggle with, is how do we get from point A to point B to serve that end customer? When we think about open access that we talked about, to me, that's an exciting space. So if co-ops or, energy companies got in the game of being like middle mile providers, that would open up a whole world of ISPs to serve the edge, the end customer. And that's something that I think could be really exciting. I don't even know whether or not they offer that as an option, but
Drew, do they offer that as well?
do they? Yeah. But I mean, that's cool, because that's one of our biggest problems in our CLEC territory is how do we get to those hard to reach customers where maybe it's a $5-10 million build to build fiber when maybe there's already an infrastructure. And it's very costly to, have proper separation on a pole, pay the penalties, make ready, all that stuff. So to have mid-mile where we could say, hey, maybe it's a layer 2. I don't know what they offer. Never talked to them before about this, but that would be super cool. And that excites me about a potential opportunity in the future. So that's neat to
Somebody
hear.
spiked that coffee, didn't
Yeah,
they?
I know.
Come on.
We're actually doing, amazingly enough, we're doing a lot of our leases as dark fiber, because we don't want to have any responsibility in doing any reporting for broadband purposes.
That's great, because there's so much monopoly in that mid-mile space.
Correct. Yeah, and that's one of the things about our middle mile project that I feel is very unique, is we're not putting any optics on there. You put on there what you want, and you just tell us where you're going. So
and then we're trying to give enough access points. Right?
Correct.
So we can have here's where we can have splice locations. Here's where we can get into that.
and it doesn't mean that we can't go and do like a mid-sheath splice with a ring cut and all that, but we're trying to identify those spaces that we've already gotten a splice in, so that way we can pull service from there very easily, but we can always accommodate others as needed. So.
Can I ask a question?
Hey, you know what? I'm just the I'm the eye candy here. I can just sit back.
So
and
are you guys using electrification lines to push data, or are you just putting fiber? Is it aerial? Is it in conduit? Like, what is that infrastructure in your model?
So we have a mix of both aerial and underground.
Okay.
Now, where it goes aerial, we're using our existing electric right of way. So we're actually utilizing Senate Bill 19107. Yeah. So that created a statute where a electric utility could use its existing electric easement
Right.
for communications purposes,
Okay.
while providing additional access to third-party vendors, like Comcast of the world or any other entity who wants to access our pole for communications.
Okay.
Now, kind of the unique thing about that is it hasn't actually been challenged in court as of yet. I see it probably will be coming at some point, because it could be considered as a take on someone's property or easement that you already got in. Yeah. However, we're trying to also make
litigious people.
Yeah, they don't want fast internet. We'll just dial it back.
Hey,
So.
you're going to be litigious, you get slow internet. You go back to the dial-up.
But so that's where we're kind of uniquely placed or positioned to get to those drainages that don't have anything right now. And we've got some standing wood, I'll call it, in the ground that we can actually mount to and get up there. That's great. And that's where we're working with partners, in our area to get up into those drainages. And, a lot of the cost for Holy Cross at this point is make ready. We're an old electric utility. We've been around since 1939. And in that time, we've got a lot of aging infrastructure. So some of that just has to be replaced because of the age of the pole.
I'm assuming you guys have a yearly budget, right? A budget from a pole replacement, just on an electrical side.
We have a maintenance budget. Yes.
So I mean, is there in your guys' position? Has there been kind of trying to coordinate some of that with the fiber work that you guys are doing to try to have some of that maintenance work on those poles happening? Where we're also going to be placing fiber, so it's kind of trying to help us at the same time as well.
There is a lot of that in many cases, although where we're trying to get fiber for these other partners, we're having to do it at a much more rapid pace than what our budget allows for. And that's where we've created this unique problem of engineering needs to review those drawings, engineering needs to say, okay, we need to do make ready on these sections, and they don't have that in place to do that.
Is there an expectation, and I guess this is for all of you guys, like an expectation with every day there's a headline about broadband, about funding, about all the things that, the necessity of the digital divide. Is that creating member community angst and an urgency? Is that pushing you guys to move faster to get this stuff done?
There's one community in that's really coming to mind right now. It's in Marble, Colorado. Yeah. Marble has no internet connectivity.
They got some good barbecue though, buddy.
Hey, I'm telling you, if you're ever up there, let's go. Yeah. Fishing's good too.
Yes, it is. Yes, sir.
But anyway, so they actually have nothing up there. CenturyLink, they've installed. Well, they've installed fiber clear up to basically the road that churns up into Marble, but they don't go up over McClure Pass because it was a costly venture. But seeing how that place is served, with previous funding opportunities, we can't actually go and apply for a lot of those funds like RDOF, and which is a disadvantage to everybody because they say they have services up there. Yeah, they could provide it. They've got fiber in the ground there, but they're not letting anybody access it. So that's where the partner that we're working with right now, getting service into Marble, is actually going to do a fiber to the home project. But they're also getting services through that third party, Lumen, to get into the Marble.
From a backhaul perspective.
From a backhaul. And now we're working with them to come up the Crystal River Valley to then provide the rest of those folks who have very little internet with much better internet.
So urgency, yes, right? Yeah. I mean, that was the question, right? Urgency, tomorrow, yesterday.
Is that push, I guess,
well,
is that
yes,
pushing
because
behavior?
Yes, because municipalities, governments, counties, they're engaged, right? It's the first time, at least I've been in the industry for 20 years. And now legislators, senators, thank you, I appreciate that, yeah. They're really excited about all of this. I think the challenge is, and that's what's been great, again, I'm a little biased working with Bonfire because they've been great being able to help us distinguish areas that work and don't work. There's a lot of math equations. So although there is billions of dollars of funding, it has to meet the right requirements. Yeah. You have to play it's a grant application game, right? You have to get points, and so it's very tricky to be able to get all of that funding. And to your point, if it's an executable location, you're going, I can't touch it. And so it's a challenge, but I think to your question, yes, there's a lot of urgency both on providers as well as community leaders to try to implement broadband because, again, after COVID, it's on everybody's mind. How long does it take before it's no longer on everybody's mind? I don't know, but that energy might start to drop off a little bit.
Well, I think there's going to be the angst of people, like they want it. There's been so much talk about it. They want action fast, right? So and it does take time to build a fiber network. It is not hey, I'm going to order Domino's pizza. It's 30 minutes or less. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Like, it is a process.
Now you can drop a pin where you order your pizza and they'll deliver it to you.
And that's part of the problem too, right? Is because you're going to have issues where, you know, we're talking about that today in the industry. What about resources in 3, 4, 5 years at the end of BEAD, or if you're part of an enhanced ACAM program, whatever it might be? Because, you know, this first 2 years, vendors are going, hey, we can get fiber and conduit pretty quick, but what happens in 4 or 5 years? What happens to the workforce? So I think it's important for companies right now to really have long-term strategy about workforce development. How can they procure the right items and equipment and networks? Build, make America products as well. So we have to really be able to figure out and solve those problems now, so that we're not in 5 years going, I don't know what happened. I can't do it. And now those
You don't want that
consumers
really bad
are really
oh shit
upset.
moment, right?
Yes, definitely. Yep. Like, we handed out billions of dollars and this still isn't built. Well, yeah, because we can't get across that bridge or river or up the canyon or whatever. And so there's a lot of challenges that we're faced with. But the exciting thing is we're all here. We're all talking about it. And we're looking to solve those problems together. And I think that's a big change in the industry. There's a way more collaboration from both private and public entities. And there's never been more momentum or energy to provide the true last mile to those very difficult unserved customers, like maybe in Marble. Now you can at least get those conversations going where maybe 5-10 years ago, people wouldn't even listen to you. Oh, it's too expensive. We're not even going to talk about it. Now they're going, how do we do it? Because again, the governor was here today, 99%, right? That's the goal. So how do you get to 99% if Marble has, and again, I don't know how many customers are up there, but let's just say there's 50 people or 100 people. How do you build to those 100 people? We have to solve that problem.
So, Drew, let me ask you this. I mean, so to that point of how important is broadband planning now?
We're working really close with Bill's team on is just trying to figure out kind of it's kind of juggling a couple different things. You're looking into it from a design perspective, you're looking at it from a cost perspective, from an operations perspective, and really just trying to figure out, can all of this work under X amount of dollars? Exactly. And I think so important in that is you want to have those numbers as close, and it's going to be budget. It's a budget thing, and we get that. But the closer and the more dialed in you can be on that front end, you just set yourself up to be just much more successful.
And to add on to that, sorry to interrupt, Nick, is the operational part, right? So one of the things that we're all talking about for the last 2 years is there's a lot of money coming, the infrastructure bill, right? Billions of dollars. The problem that we're not really talking about is slicing the pie, because, yeah, even if you build it, some of these communities, they might get funding, but how do you operate it long term? And there's not a lot of revenue involved in it, right? So you might be talking about a 30-person community. Well, that's not a lot of revenue when it took you $5 million to build to them, even with some help from the federal government.
I was going to say, at a certain
government,
point, though,
right?
I mean, part of all of this
So
funding
that's
is that you have to acknowledge, like, it's not all about the revenue, right? It is about serving the purpose
Yes.
to get these people access that is a right as a citizen, right?
Well, that's why the co-ops do really good in that space, is because we feel that those members have that right to that access of electric, of fiber, broadband, whatever you want to talk about. But I mean, furthermore, not only just on the operations side, now you have to factor in that maintenance.
That's what I'm getting at. It's the support.
Yeah,
and
so-
USF becomes really important, because that's not a topic we talked about today. Universal Service Fund is changing as we speak, and the difficulty is they still haven't solved the contribution problem. They're talking about distribution, right? But contribution, well, where does that money come from? It comes from a phone bill. Well, how many customers out there right now have an actual phone line, right? I don't know about you, but I don't know very many people that have an original POTS phone line, right? Yeah, way back. Yeah, not to age myself. So that's the difficulties, because
Hey,
customers
Stephen,
right now
I know what the POT stands for, so not many people.
Plain old
plain old
telephone.
telephone.
And they're paying 30 cents on the dollar. It's basically almost a 30% rate on their phone bill to pay for Universal Service Fund. If you don't know what that is, that funds rural broadband. And so what we have to do is solve that problem. FCC is talking about it, but we need to pressure the FCC and legislators.
I'm just saying.
We believe that they have the power to make that decision, but they haven't made the decision yet. I think there's a lot of thought about going after technology and edge customers. But here's the thing, right? Even if you did that, they're just going to pass it on to the consumer. If you charged every broadband customer a couple of pennies, you'd probably fund rural broadband forever. I mean, that's just, I don't know if that's the right answer, but we have to figure out the contribution because marble matters, right? Yep. Yeah. And no pun intended.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that's the question which we haven't, it doesn't often come up because we're so focused on the now.
20 years, 30 years from now.
Yeah.
How do you drive out that 2 hours to serve that one customer who's out of service?
I did see a robot driving around earlier
That's true.
today,
There is
so
that.
there was, I mean, maybe it's just.
What's her name? I might get her a job.
I mean, yeah,
is it a her?
I don't
Is
know.
it gender neutral?
It's a they.
Is that-
Yeah.
Okay, it's a they.
I think it's non-binary. I think.
Non-binary.
Well, actually, no.
Yeah,
That one is binary because it's 1 and 0.
No, no, but that's great points, and I think that the idea of trying to make sure that we're looking ahead, taking this funding. Is there anything else you think, though, that we should be, the people should be thinking about when it comes to the different models? I mean, we're again, August 2023, and what should we be thinking about for your, basically the people that you're serving across the board, the different models? What should they be thinking about over the next 12 months? What should they expect, I guess?
I would think that they would want to expect great internet services. Whether it's for their own surfing, streaming, whatever they're using it for. I think they should, have that as an expectation, no matter where they're at. Now, if you want to be off grid, I totally understand that. There's things for that as well.
Hey, the sale of bunkers, end of world bunkers are climbing.
Yeah, that's true. But I think with having that urgency, I think if you try to get these networks in and you don't have a plan to execute it well and maintain it, I think whatever we're doing right now won't be successful into the future. And I think if we're not paying attention to that future and having that mind's eye open for that, we won't be successful long term.
So let me just a little bit of a tangent on that. I mean, so obviously we're all in the industry, we see what's going on, but I've seen a lot of headlines and a lot of news articles, research reports about companies that have popped up brand new that have never been in the broadband space, never been in telecom, and because there's billions of dollars. How do you avoid that? How do you avoid, what are you looking for in companies to make sure that collaboration, trust, all that's there, and you don't get, there's these people that are not going to be in it for the long haul? Because at the end of the day, I think you guys have all said, right, it is the long term. It's not about, the next 6 months, next 12 months.
I think that's a very difficult question to answer, to be honest. Everybody's well-intentioned. They want to make sure that they're doing good, but there are those companies out there that are sheerly taking advantage of the vast amounts of money out there right now.
I do think, though, that there's actually something that's changed in this new era, which is there's more accountability around it, right? There's more vetting. So unlike maybe some of the older programs that were happening, they would just hand out the money before there was really anything designed, or and you just had a lot of non-accountability. There's more accountability today. I think the other thing is the customer decides. Because the reality is even if it does fail, which there might be some of those startups that fail, the customer is going to make that decision. The other side of that is, I've thought about this a little bit because we've had, again, back to being open, because in the past there was a lot of these companies that popped up, spent a lot of the government money, and then they walked away, right? They left.
They're like the pop-up bars at Christmas, right?
Right. They popped up, then they're gone, right? And then customers suffered, right? And that's really unfortunate. So when you think about that, those companies that did that, their intentions weren't right. But here's the thing, there's probably a lot of people in the industry from maybe some of these other bigger companies that maybe actually want to go and start something that actually is well-intentioned. So we can't totally dismiss the fact that there may be some organizations that come on board that they've never been truly, that name hasn't been involved in broadband, that maybe they have 30 people who've been in the industry for 20 years and they know how to run a company, right? So I don't want to completely dismiss them completely. But we have to just make sure that we vet that, and I know that communities, municipalities, customers, all of those together are probably working. I just went through kind of a vetting process within some of my own kind of municipalities and counties, where going in front of them and saying, hey, here's what we plan on doing. Will you support us? They could turn around and say no, right? Well, that hurts my application process. So we're trying to get ahead of that and build that relationship. So if you're a provider, it's really critical you build that relationship with your community, municipality, and county, because the government has put certain brackets around who's actually working within their community and who just wants to come in and just grab that federal money. Right. So I do give kudos a little bit to the government. I don't do that very often.
I like the
Those words have never been said.
Never said, ever.
Wait,
ever. Let me have another
Thought it
drink.
was a little cold in here.
I drank here.
So, anyway, yeah, I think it's an exciting future that we have ahead. It's a once in a generation lifetime to build fiber, internet, whatever, to customers who otherwise would never have it. So,
yeah, I think that to kind of go along the lines of that accountability, I've seen how the government has learned from its past mistakes. Where with
Again,
RDOF,
those words typically don't
yeah, I know, but those
a lot of firsts here today.
yeah, those past mistakes where they've just said, okay, well, if this census block, if it's served, it's served, which doesn't work, especially for Marble, because that's where they were really lacking. And now you look at BEAD and what the criteria is for that. I mean, it's very stringent, very tight. And unless you're a company that's worth your salt, you're not going to be getting any of those funds. Right.
And I think there's a lot more at state levels that's really pushing community engagement aspects, and not just like we have 3 letters that are signed from the same type letter of support that's signed. Right. They're looking for actual community engagement and support. So.
Right. And you actually have offices now, right? I mean, a lot of states never had broadband offices.
Yeah, there's a lot of broadband directors here.
Exactly. So I think that goes to show that they've learned. And again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's a lot better than it was before. And so that gives me hope that, we're going in the right direction.
And I think we all have the purpose is, clear. I think everybody's rallying around that. And that alone is a shift, right? It's not just about making money. It's about serving a purpose, which is, honestly, just, heartfelt, nice to see.
We were talking, you kind of mentioned the once in a lifetime opportunity. My uncle went through this because he was the general manager CEO for Holy Cross for quite a few years.
Wow,
and so, yeah, thanks. So he saw the original deployment of the electric infrastructure within our valley and was a part of that from the very beginning. And then for me to come in and be a part of that for the fiber business, I think that's pretty neat.
I love that.
That's legacy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wait, one last question. We obviously talking a lot about fiber. What's any killer app, anything you think is going to happen that's going to really continue to drive the need for fiber, the need for this extra broadband, like anything that's just you've seen in the headlines? That,
I guess I just keep on.
Not TikTok, by the way.
I'm not a smart-brained man in that sense, so I do not know what the future holds. What I do know is that glass in itself, it's limitless. It is limitless. It's the equipment on the side, on either side of this that you do. So once you get that glass in there, I think that's.
He's
the
not
huge
talking
drive.
about this glass, by the way.
It's
Just for
getting
the record,
that, getting that
optics.
fiber
Yeah,
optic
okay.
in the ground or in the air.
There is something out there, though, right? There is an application, software, something that's going to tend to break everything we built, because we saw that with innovation, right? We see it every day. There's some new platform that comes along that requires twice as much bandwidth. There's going to come a point at some point that breaks everything we built. The exciting part is exactly what you just said, which is when you put fiber in the ground, it's scalable. There will come a point when that breaks too, but it's not truly future-proof until we probably come up with, quantum particle entanglement, and that becomes part of our way forward. And if you don't know what that is, Google it.
He's a smart guy in the group.
So,
right here. Yeah.
but that's, I think
I'm
really.
transporting myself out.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's the exciting part is fiber really does future-proof, at least in our lifetimes, and it's scalable. But there is an app, there's a platform that's going to require, 2 2 meg to work, or 2 gig to work, 5 gig, 10 gig, 100 gig. There will come a point where we're like, because I remember 10, 15, 20 years ago talking about bandwidth, and we're like, a meg, 1.5, that's amazing.
Hey, I was a dial-up product
know?
manager, so I remember
Right.
I was like, wow, this is 28
In Ks.
Boom!
We're talking Ks. Now we're talking about megs,
My first modem was a 14.4.
Oh, yeah.
There's some speed.
So I think, yes, there's definitely applications out there that are going to push the limit, and unless you build a scalable network, you're going to have a problem down the line.
Any other predictions?
I think one's imagination is going to be the only limit that we have.
And that's pretty much now AI generated. So
Yeah, I mean, let's ask ChatGPT later on.
I'm gonna find that little robot. I'm gonna ask him. As long as he can give me a pizza, I'm happy. Well, gentlemen, it's so great to have you on Beer and Broadband. Thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed the show. And for more episodes, go to our YouTube page or beerandbroadband.net. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.